Okay, so let's dig in a little deeper here and look at the general model of variance analysis. This applies to all three models: direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. So if this is a general model, it will apply to all of them, and then we'll look at each one of them individually. So here's the general model. It's a variance analysis, and we're going to look at two different things: price variance and quantity variance. So we're not taking it as a whole, we're breaking it into two pieces. The price variance is the difference between the actual price and the standard price. And the quantity variance is between the actual quantity and the standard quantity. So remember, we had a standard cost guard. That's how much it should be to create this product. We used an example of a Big Mac, but whatever it is, whatever that product is, there's a standard cost of what that should cost. But at the end of the month, we actually have real bills. We have real costs. So we can compare and see if we're high or low. Now, in comparing in high or low, the way we use the terms high or low in budgeting, we say it's favorable to the budget or unfavorable to the budget. So it's not like it's negative or positive. It's favorable is obviously we were below budget, and unfavorable was we spent more than we thought we would. So let's look at this model for a little bit deeper. There's going to be three different variances for both price and three variances for quantity. So if you look at the slide here, it says materials price variance, labor rate variance, and variable overhead rate variance under price variance. And then under quantity variance, there's materials, labor, and overhead for the quantity variances as well. So we're looking at essentially 6 different variances in 3 different categories: materials, labor, and overhead. This is the general model of variance analysis. It seems somewhat complicated, I guess, at first glance, but it's really simple. I will do another video on calculation on how to do this on a spreadsheet, so it's really simple for you. But you should grasp the model here because this is very important. So when we look at this model, the top 3 numbers, number 1, 2, and 3, are actual quantity times actual price, actual quantity times standard price, and number 3 is standard quantity at standard price. Another way to look at that is if I break it down a little further, you can see that actual quantity is in number 1 and number 2, and then standard quantity is in number 3. And then if you go to the other level, the second level that's multiplied by, you get actual price in number 1 and standard price in 2 and 3. So we're basically taking data and multiplying it by each other and then comparing them next to each other in the second level down. If you didn't grab all that, that's okay, because an example or two will explain it to you. So we're going to get to those in just a second. But what we should think about here is where we're headed. So let me put it in different terms. If you look at the slide, under number 1 here, you have actual quantity times actual price. Well, under number 1, this is what we spent for the month. We had actual number of hamburger buns is this, and we spent, $1,000 on hamburger buns. That's actual quantity times actual price. So that is pretty obvious on how we would calculate that. Next to it is number 2, is actual quantity of input at standard price. So it's actual quantity times standard price. So we actually had 1,000 hamburger buns, but what we should have spent instead of $1,000 was $800. So when you start thinking about what we're comparing here, the difference between these two, if you look under price variance under 2 minus 1, the second tier down, 2 minus 1, the price variance is what was compare the standard price to the actual price. So you've got the actual quantities, and then you compare the standard price to the actual price. Take the actual price, subtract the standard price, and you'll see that there's a difference between what you should have paid and what you did pay. So if you should have paid $1,000 for hamburger buns for the month, and you actually spent $800 on hamburger buns for the month, you would have a positive variance. You spent $200 less than you should have, and you would have a positive variance or a favorable variance in budgetary terms, a favorable variance of $200. And you would see that by simply multiplying the actual quantity times the actual price and the actual quantity times the standard price, and then subtracting the two, you could see what your variance was for the month with regard to pricing. Likewise, if you go to the second part of the equation, you can see that the actual quantity of input at the standard price, if you compare that to number 3, which is standard quantity at standard price, you can see that the standard price is the same, but above it is the actual quantity and the actual, or the standard price, or standard quantity, excuse me. So it's on the bottom, it's standard price versus standard price. Above that, in number 2, it's actual quantity. Number 3, it's standard quantity. So you can see that you're comparing there the quantities between the two. And so if you had, I don't know, 100 hamburger buns in your standard amount, or I take that back. If you used 1 hamburger bun for your standard amount of buns per sandwich, and you actually used 1.1 because there was a bunch of waste in the shipment. Some of them came in moldy or whatever, you threw them out. You actually used 1.1 hamburger buns per hamburger over the course of the month. Then you would have an unfavorable variance of 0.1 hamburger buns. Of course, the cost of the hamburger buns over the month. So an example will clarify this for you. If you didn't quite grasp that, that's okay. But you understand that you're simply comparing the actual for the month versus what you thought you would have, and the actual quantity versus what you thought you would have, and that's the variance process. So let's do some examples because I think that will clarify what you're thinking or what you're seeing.